Hello, my name's Ed Hope. I'm a junior doctor in the UK, and like many of you during lockdown, I've been thoroughly entertained by the Queen's Gambit, the miniseries on Netflix, so much so that I've even started taking up a bit of chess. I'm terrible at it. But I was wondering, what on earth are those green pills? And as we see in the show, can it increase your cognition enough to be better at chess? Let's dive in. A bit of a recap here. When Beth first arrives at the orphanage, they give her 2 pills, and in their words, a green one to even your disposition and an orange and brown one to build a strong body. It's likely the orange and brown pill was a multivitamin. These have been kicking around about a decade earlier in the 1940s, but would have now been mainstream due to the cheaper cost of production. So it would contain vitamins like A, the B vitamins, and vitamin C and D. Probably most relevant to what they're saying here is vitamin D, because along with calcium, that is what you need to build strong bones. So probably what they're talking about here when they say building a strong body, because deficiencies in this will lead to softening on the bones and bowing deformities, a disease called Rickets. But the pill we're interested in here is the green pill, which helps your disposition, which is a bit of an understatement, because when Beth first takes it, she becomes vacant, dissociated, and out of it so much that she isn't bothered by the burning of her hand on a radiator, as well as developing dizziness, blurred vision, weakness, resulting in her being unsteady on her feet. And she becomes pretty drowsy at meal times too, and the other friends in the orphanage have noticed these effects, so they use them for their benefit by taking them at night time to help them sleep.
I thought I told you to wait and take those vitamins at bedtime.
Now, I didn't spot this in the show, but apparently we can see the name of the drug in one of the shots, and it's called Zanzalam. So combined with the effects we've seen and the name, it's pretty obvious what it's supposed to be. And I've seen this mentioned on a few places online, people saying it's not a real drug, it's a fictitious drug. Well, that's not entirely true. It's very much a real drug. It's definitely a benzodiazepine, but it just isn't a real brand name for a drug. A lot of drugs and brand name for drugs that are essentially in the same class share a lot of similarities in their names, so have similar prefixes and suffixes. So the name they use, Zanzalam, is probably part based on Xanax, a very well-known brand name for the benzodiazepine alprazolam. And as you can tell by that drug name, alprazolam, ending in AM, you can see where they got the ending for their fictitious brand name. The ending AM is a very common ending for benzodiazepines. You have lorazepam, diazepam, midazolam, clonazepam. It's like a pharmacist rapper's dream. Just a quick note, the different benzodiazepines all have very similar effects, but actually differ in kind of how quickly they act and how long they act for, that type of thing. In terms of the actual benzodiazepine used in the show, evidence points towards chlordiazepoxide, as when Beth's mum dies later on in the series, Beth asks the doctor to help settle her nerves for some Librium.
Could you give me a tranquilizer?
Yes, I have a sedative.
I don't want a sedative. Could I have a prescription for Librium?
Librium is the brand name for chlordiazepoxide, a drug we still use today in the emergency department for alcohol withdrawal, and it was the first benzodiazepine to be ever made, patented in 1958 and approved for medical use in 1960. When it first came out, everyone thought it was super safe until they realized people that were taking it were having lots of motor accidents. And it fits as well because it was the only benzodiazepine available at this time, diazepam coming a few years later. So the actual availability at the orphanage may be a year or two out, because I think that's supposed to be set in the late 1950s, but we heard it only really came out in 1960. But either way, the timings do reflect this change in public opinion, from people thinking it's a super safe drug to people being very cautious with it. And this is alluded to in the scene where we find out it's been banned from the state.
Where are the green ones?
You don't get them anymore.
There they are, right behind you.
I know where they are, Harmon, but I'm not gonna give you any. New state law.
And if we Google some pictures of chlordiazepoxide pills, I mean, they're not identical, but you can see where they got the inspiration. So what actually are benzodiazepines? So as we learn in the scene here from the chap dissing out the pills, they're a form of tranquilizer, so a type of sedative. And it is actually one of the most prescribed drugs in the whole world. They're probably now going to sound like a bit of a wonder drug, because as well as being sedatives, They're also anticonvulsants, anti-anxiety, and muscle relaxants, meaning they have a wide range of uses. So they're actually first line in terminating seizures, first line in alcohol withdrawal, used in anxiety, insomnia, restless leg syndrome, and a bunch of other things. Given its effects, it's probably no surprise to learn that benzodiazepines work on the brain. In simplistic terms, your brain activity is modulated by two neurotransmitters, glutamate, which have an excitatory, so increase in activity of the brain, and we have GABA, the inhibitory one that balances it out. Benzodiazepines work by increasing the effectiveness of the GABA neurotransmitter, so the inhibitory signals of the brain, calming down activity and giving the effects. And so this is the reason why Beth, when she first takes it, is dizzy and unsteady, because her brain isn't able to process everything's going on and her muscles are relaxed, and also why she's less anxious when she burns her hand, because she's just less bothered. The show also shows us some of the major issues of benzodiazepines. So you build up a tolerance, meaning you need more and more of it to have the same effect. So when she first takes it, she has these very overt symptoms, and then later on, she never really gets these symptoms again. For this reason, we only prescribe them for as short a time as possible, ideally just a few days, not every day, and for someone who doesn't need them, like we see in the Queen's Gambit, because it can be very difficult to get people off them, because your brain gets used to this exogenous chemical in your brain, this outside influence on your brain, so it basically rebalances to become dependent on it. And therefore, if we then remove the drug, we take people off the drug, they're gonna get symptoms of withdrawal. So now your brain will be naturally overexcited, so would get pretty much the exact opposite symptoms of the drug, such as insomnia, anxiety attacks. It lowers your seizure threshold, tremors, headaches, and just makes you feel awful, even suicidal. And for these reasons, they are highly addictive, as we see infamously from the pill stealing scene. So Beth would have been having withdrawal symptoms, driving her to a frenzy to steal the pills and ultimately overdose on them. This scene is pretty darn realistic in terms of the effects she'd get from an overdose. As emergency doctors, we need to be aware of overdoses of benzodiazepines, because the patient groups that tends to take them, so people that suffer from insomnia and anxiety, are more likely to be suicidal, and therefore the pills they're going to take are the ones they're going to have lying around. It'd be no surprise to you that Beth would be in a lot of danger taking an overdose like this, but let's just try and quantify it. So assuming we're dealing with chlordiazepoxide, we actually don't tend to give it to children, but I'm guessing the dose would be something like 5 milligrams. Each tablet would be 5 milligrams. So she has like 50 tablets, so around 250 milligrams. That is a whopping dose. The toxic dose of chlordiazepoxide is 2 milligrams per kilogram. So let's assume she weighs, what, 30 kilograms? So 60 milligram dose would be toxic, and she's had 250 milligrams. At least, probably even a little bit more as well. So she's going to be having the severe end of the symptoms. So, you know, loss of consciousness, heart arrhythmias, low blood pressure, probably even slipping into a coma too. The only thing I would say is the effects come on a little bit quickly. The peak for chlordiazepoxide ingestion is around about an hour later. So even though she collapses here, she's going to be going in a deeper and deeper state of consciousness, which is very worrying that she has this reaction so quickly. And also a nasty fall and head injury and neck injury there. We can't forget about that. So we've all learned about benzodiazepines, but can they help you concentrate more? Are you going to sit down to play chess, have some Librium, and next minute be a grandmaster, or sit an exam, pop a pill and ace it? Hell no. They are just not some magic performance enhancing brain doping drug. Quite the opposite. They're going to make you drowsy at best, and at worst probably really confused. So very much performance inhibiting, unless the performance is who can fall asleep quickest. However, if Beth has built up a tolerance to the medication, so she's taking it every day and now her body's dependent on it to function normally, then she will definitely need some of it just to think straight, let alone play chess. So this is probably the best explanation for what's going on in the show, although I don't think that's what the series actually shows us, because she doesn't seem to have like overt withdrawal symptoms between games. She only seems to need the pill when she's in a game and suddenly needs to think straight. And no doubt taking a pill like this would settle your nerves in the game, but it would settle it in a way to make you kind of care less and be a bit more relaxed about everything. So it kind of harks back to when people first took chlordiazepoxide. They were no doubt extremely relaxed, even though they had a kind of 10 times risk of having a motor traffic accident. And finally, just to leave you with another interesting thought, so Beth sees the chessboard on the ceiling. I'm pretty sure that's more of a metaphor or a kind of storytelling element. If she did actually see the pieces moving on the ceiling, then that would be a visual hallucination. And benzodiazepines are actually used in the treatment for hallucinations when they're caused by alcohol withdrawal. So normally benzodiazepines are good for hallucinations, so should actually make them disappear, but actually they can have paradoxical effects, meaning that some people take benzodiazepines and will have hallucinations. So you might think that's exactly what's going on here, but actually you'd expect some much more severe side effects to come along with it, such as, you know, confusion, psychosis, and just not being orientated or being able to think straight. So that's not what's happening here, because there's no way you'd be able to play chess with those kind of symptoms. So there you have it. Hopefully that's answered some of the questions or given you a little bit more insight into what was going on in The Queen's Gambit. Absolutely superb show. Really enjoyed this one. If you like this content, then why not subscribe? It's free. Don't bother turning on the notifications. You don't need me pestering you. Just drop back in whenever you like, and there'll be some content explaining medical things in simple terms. So on that note, thank you so much for all the ongoing support, and I'll see you soon.